Okay, if you've ever stared down a stack of unread books on your nightstand and just felt a massive wave of guilt, yeah, you're definitely in the right place. Today, we're completely shifting our mindset. In this explainer, we're going to stop feeling guilty and we're going to start building reading habits that actually stick. Let's dive in. So, why does starting a book actually feel so heavy? I mean, most people think it's because they're just bad at reading or maybe they lack discipline. But honestly, resistance to reading isn't a character flaw. It's definitely not a lack of willpower. What feels so hard is this invisible, heavy load behind the act itself. It's the mental work of settling your attention, finding patience, and overcoming the sheer friction of just getting started. You're basically trying to force your brain into a completely different mental pace. Think about trying to read when your mind is noisy and tired. It's kind of like trying to study in a super crowded, chaotic cafe, right? The problem in that scenario isn't the notebook or the material you're trying to learn. The problem is literally everything else competing for your mental energy while you're just trying to focus. Reading works exactly the same way. If your mind is pressured or if it's expecting some instant payoff, even reading one single simple page can feel impossibly heavy. Now, here's the absolute core idea you need to keep in mind for this entire explainer. A reading habit is not built by pushing harder. No way! Instead, it's built by reducing the cost of starting and making the reward way easier to feel. Seriously, when reading feels difficult, you gotta remember, it's a system issue, not a you issue. To fix that system, we kind of need to redefine what a habit actually is. Look, it's not some magical personality trait reserved for the highly disciplined. It's literally just a shortcut. It's a shortcut your brain learns after repeating a behavior in a familiar situation over and over. Your brain is essentially an energy-saving machine. When something happens often enough in the exact same context, the brain compresses the decision-making process just to save energy. It stops deliberating and it just starts executing. Without a habit in place, you are basically exhausting yourself negotiating every single time you want to read. You're thinking, should I read now? Am I too tired? Maybe later. That mental debate creates immense starting friction, leaving you entirely dependent on whatever mood you're in. But with a habit, context leads to action. There's no debate. There's way less starting friction, and you just rely on the context. It's exactly like how you don't negotiate with yourself about brushing your teeth before bed. You just do it. But here's the real secret. Automaticity is the results of learning. It's not the starting point. Every single habit begins manually. You have to notice the cue, choose the action, and reliably repeat it before your brain ever steps in to take over and compress it into a shortcut. Basically, you have to teach your brain the pattern first. And for a behavior to actually repeat, your brain needs a noticeable payoff. That could be a sense of calm, a sparked curiosity, or honestly, even just relief from endless doom scrolling. The reward doesn't have to be massive, but it absolutely has to be felt. It's a lot like watering a plant, you know? When you pour water into the soil, the immediate effect is pretty much invisible. But over time, the plant associates that water with survival and growth. Your brain needs to associate the act of reading with a reliable, totally worthwhile feeling. Because if there's a mismatch there, the habit is going to fail. Period. If reading looks like a massive struggle with zero immediate payoff, your brain simply won't do it. Imagine carrying a ridiculously heavy grocery bag for miles and miles only to get a single penny as a reward. Your brain naturally goes, why on earth am I doing this? If the beginning feels heavy and the result feels invisible, your brain treats reading as an uneconomical threat to your energy reserves, and it naturally puts up resistance. All right, let's move into section 1, the friction triad. Start, attention, and meaning. Now, what's really cool here is that you don't actually need to solve all three of these at once. Start, attention, and meaning often kind of blend together, which is what makes reading feel vaguely exhausting overall. But reducing just one kind of friction can fundamentally change your brain's calculation from, whoa, this is a threat to my energy, to, okay, this is an expected, manageable routine. So let's break these down. First up is start friction. Think of this as the hidden gatekeeper. The reason you can't get yourself to begin is so often just due to decision load. Think about it. Before you even read a single word, you have to choose which book, which page, how long you're going to read, and whether it's even the right time. All those tiny little questions create a massive drag. Ambiguity makes the brain hesitate. When the beginning requires way too many decisions, you spend all your mental energy before the actual value of reading is even available to you. Next, we have attention friction. This is when you finally sit down to read, but your mind just keeps slipping away, right? You find yourself rereading the exact same lines over and over.
This happens because reading asks the mind to stay with one single thread, which creates a super frustrating mismatch if your brain is still completely wired for the instant novelty and fast reward loops of scrolling on your phone. Your brain simply hasn't settled into that slower pace that text requires.
To put that into perspective, I want you to imagine attention as a flashlight. A scattered flashlight lights up a whole bunch of things weakly, and that's exactly how we scroll online. A steady flashlight, though, lights up one thing clearly, and that is what reading needs. The goal here isn't to force the beam harder through sheer willpower, but simply to help it stay directed on one thing just long enough for the shape and meaning of the words to actually appear. Finally, there's meaning friction. You're reading, you're focused, but nothing is landing. Your mind starts asking, wait, why does this matter? What am I even getting from this? If the text doesn't give your mind enough structure to hold on to, it halts that visible signal of understanding. And remember, understanding is the reward your brain is looking for. Without it, your motivation just plummets. When you look at all these frictions together, you start to realize that reading isn't just a single act. It's actually a sequence of micro events. You notice the cue, you decide to begin, you enter the text, stay with it, build comprehension, and finally recognize completion. It's like a chain. If any one of these steps becomes too expensive mentally, the entire loop breaks down and boom, you put the book away. To fix this sequence, we absolutely must design for ease. Think of reading like opening a door. If the door's incredibly heavy, stuck, and just super hard to push, you're going to avoid it. But if it swings open smoothly, you don't even think about it. Now, designing for ease doesn't mean lowering our reading standards to shallow, easy texts. We still want the useful effort of stretching our minds. What we want to remove is all that wasteful effort spent just trying to start. We want to make that first movement feel completely ordinary. So I'm going to leave you with this empowering question. Where is friction entering your reading system? Is it the start, the attention, or the meaning? You see, you're no longer a bad reader. You are a system designer looking for a bottleneck. So what's the very first piece of friction you're going to remove today?